Good morning. This morning's Old Testament lesson comes from the 19th chapter of 1 Kings, and I'm reading from the Revised Standard Version. Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with a sword. Then Jezebel sent the messenger to Elijah, saying, "So may the gods do to me and more also, if I do not make your life like the life of one of them by this time tomorrow." Then he was afraid. He got up and fled for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah. He left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a solitary broom tree. He asked that he might die. "It is enough. Now, O Lord, take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors." Then he lay down under the broom tree and fell asleep. Suddenly the angel touched him and said to him, "Get up and eat." And he looked, and there at his head was a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. He ate and drank and lay down again. The angel of the Lord came a second time, touched him, and said, "Get up and eat, or the journey will be too much for you." He got up and ate and drank, and then he went in the strength of that food for 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mount of God. At this place he came to a cave and spent the night there. Then the word of the Lord came to him, saying, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And he answered, "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the Israelites have forsaken your covenant and thrown down your altars and killed your prophets with a sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." He said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Now there was a great wind, so strong that it was splitting the mountains and breaking the rocks into pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a sound of sheer silence. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in a mantle and went out and stood at the entrance to the cave. Then there came a voice to him that said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He answered, "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." Then the Lord said to him, "Go and return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus. And when you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael as king over Aram, and you shall anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, as king over Israel, and you shall appoint Elisha, son of Shaphat of Abel-Meholah, as prophet in your place. Whoever escapes the sword of Hazael, Jehu will kill. Whoever escapes the sword of Jehu, Elisha shall kill. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, and all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him." So he set out from there and found Elisha, son of Shaphat, who was plowing. There were 12 yoke of oxen ahead of him, and he was with the 12th. Elijah passed by him and threw his mantle over him. He left his oxen and ran after Elijah and said, "Let me kiss my father and my mother, and then I will follow you." Then Elijah said to him, "Go back again, for what have I done to you?" He returned and followed him. He returned from following him. Took the yoke of oxen, slaughtered them. Using the equipment from the oxen, he boiled their flesh and gave it to the people, and they ate. Then he set out and followed Elijah and became his servant. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you high and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory. Pour out your power and love as we sing, holy, holy, holy. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. To see you high and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory. Pour out your power and love as we sing, holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. I want to see you. Holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. I want to see you. Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart. Not be all else to me, save that thou art. Thou my best Lord, by day or by night. Waking or sleeping, thy presence my sight. Holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. I want to see you.
So it is my pleasure this morning to introduce our guest preacher. Note one thing, I am reading her bio and her words, okay? So, Brittany Edwards joined the team of Aldersgate United Methodist Church as their communications director last September. Preaching is her most favorite thing in all the world. So she was very thrilled to be invited to our pulpit this morning. She is ordained in the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship, a graduate of Duke Divinity School, and a huge church history nerd. Her current home parish is St. Timothy's Episcopal Church in North Raleigh, where she leads a young adult ministry and serves as a lay preacher. And if you're thinking, I wonder how a former Baptist and current Episcopalian, ended up serving in a Methodist church, well, that makes two of us. God is full of wonderful surprises, isn't he? It is my pleasure to introduce Brittany Edwards as our guest minister this morning.
Thank you so much.
You are quite welcome.
How do you know when you're hearing God? I'll tell you who knew: Elijah. We read today a pretty long chapter, but blame that on me, I insisted. But even that chapter was just a small part of Elijah's story that we can read in the book of 1 Kings. Before this, so before our passage today, Elijah had controlled the weather, was fed miraculously by ravens who God sent to bring him food. Elijah made food multiply in a miracle that actually foreshadowed Jesus' feeding of the 5,000. Elijah was the first recorded person in the Bible to raise someone from the dead. So there's that. Elijah was in the courts of the king and spoke directly to the court. He had a direct line to power. And in an extremely entertaining episode, in chapter 18, Elijah had challenged the false god Baal's prophets to like a little contest thing, and completely destroyed them mocked them and danced. It was really, would recommend. It is a little violent though, so maybe not the kids. But chapter 18, would recommend. So he had seen God do unbelievable things. And he had heard God speak. And he had faithfully communicated that word that he'd heard from God. Elijah is mentioned throughout the rest of the Bible as an exemplary prophet. Elijah showed up when Jesus was transfigured, right? Like the transfiguration thing. Actually, I think Transfiguration Sunday was just last week. I don't know if do y'all do the liturgical Sundays here? No? I mean, Baptists. I miss you guys. Okay, so no, last Sunday, more liturgical tradition to celebrate Transfiguration Sunday, and Elijah was present in that story. Like showing up centuries later. Like Elijah's a big deal. And he isn't one of those people in the Bible who you read mostly to know what not to do, right? You read the story of Elijah as an example for once. And even after all that, even with his status, his closeness to God and his power, he was ready to give up. He hit his limit, and that was it. That's reassuring to me. Even Elijah can just say, you know what, I'm just going to lay down right here. Honestly, God, just let me die. He had seen, this was not too long after he had challenged those other prophets and priests to this contest in which God sent down like a column of fire that burned up a pile of rocks. Like, this is wild stuff. And you would think that if you had seen God do something like that, you'd never struggle with your faith ever again. Not necessarily. And I love the first part of this chapter that we read today because God saw that Elijah was just too tired to hear. Which tells me that if we feel too tired to hear what God's saying, that's legit. You can say, God, I am exhausted, I'm stressed, I'm hungry, my car's breaking down, all of these things that are happening in my life are drowning out the sound of your voice, and I just can't hear you. That's okay. That's not anything to be ashamed of. And I think here in this part of Elijah's story, there's an invitation for us to rest and to do whatever it takes to get just a little bit of space and rest. Whatever you need in order to hear God, you should chase that. You should go after that. And I know many of our lives, maybe you have to work 80, 90 hours a week just to keep food on the table, or maybe your caretaking responsibilities are just so overwhelming that you don't know how you'll ever get time to yourself, or maybe one of these other million needs that you might have seem like they can't ever get met. But here's the thing. In this moment, God sent Elijah an angel. And this wasn't just any angel. See, in the Old Testament, a lot of times you'll see the angel of the Lord will appear in the story. And the angel of the Lord isn't really an angel. That is a pre-Jesus appearance of Jesus on earth. God the Son is not named in the Old Testament, but we believe that the second person of the Trinity, the part of the Trinity that came down and inhabited human flesh, was still present here in the Old Testament. And what's so beautiful about God sending not just some spiritual presence, but an actual physical manifestation of God's self, is that now we can look back as the body of Christ and see that as our example. Now that Jesus has come and he still lives here on earth through us as his church, we can be the angel of the Lord to each other. I have a hard time believing that if any of you came to Pastor Randy or Pastor Dietra and said, I am spent and exhausted and I can't hear God and I just need blank. I need $50 for someone to watch the person I'm responsible for watching. I need an hour alone in the church. I need whatever it is that you need. I have a hard time believing that that would be met with a no. And even if we are not all equipped to exactly meet each other's needs, that's why Jesus now lives here on earth as us. Each of us has a gift. We can each support each other. There's an angel for you if you need it. And after Elijah was no longer exhausted, after he'd laid down and had something to eat, after he slept and woke up and slept again, then God spoke. So maybe if you feel like God just hasn't talked to you in a while, maybe it's your sign to go home and take a nap. If the greatest prophet of all time just needed a snack, maybe you do too. Just a thought. So God spoke and gave Elijah his mission. This is where you're supposed to go. He was supposed to go to Mount Horeb. And Mount Horeb was the place where Moses received the 10 Commandments. Elijah, he's so special. He's the only person in the Bible who is recorded to have gone back to that spot. This is the place where, I don't know when the last time was you read the story of Moses receiving the 10 Commandments, but this is the place where God told Moses to stand in a cave, sound familiar? And God put his hand over the mouth of the cave and passed by. Oh! What? What am I supposed to do now? Okay. God put his hand over the mouth of the cave and he passed by and only took his hand away once Moses would see his back. Right? So this is one of the most incredible revelations of God in the entire redemptive history. Hey, baby girl. That's my daughter. Can you say hi? Hi, Mama? Hi. Hi. Yeah, you're good. Okay. This is one of the most incredible revelations of God in all of redemptive history, and God calls Elijah back there. At this point, Elijah was an expert at hearing God, as we've covered from his remarkable ministry. And because he had heard God so many times, he understood this next moment perfectly. As it unfolded before him, he knew exactly what to listen for. So God sent a great wind, so strong that the mountains split apart and the rocks broke in pieces. But Elijah knew that that wasn't God. And then an earthquake came, shaking the mountains. But Elijah knew that wasn't God. He knew God better than that. And then a great, utter silence. And Elijah said, there he is. And he covered his face and came to the mouth of the cave. I'm not Elijah, obviously. I'm not even close. And my guess is that none of the rest of y'all in here are either. And so I have failed this same test many, many times. Maybe you have too. It's really easy for us to assume that, okay, so we believe in God and how mighty and majestic and powerful he is, how he can do anything. And we think, okay, awesome. So if God's going to speak, it's going to be a big deal. There's going to be theatrics. There's going to be some lightning bolt moment of revelation when I know exactly what God's saying to me, and there's going to be some dramatic mission or message, or God's going to miraculously fix this situation that I'm in. If God's going to show up in my life, it's going to be big because God is so big. And I mean, sometimes that happens for sure, right? But that's not necessarily the case. See, God is so big and majestic and powerful, and what that really means is that he can literally just do whatever he wants at any time and does not owe us an explanation. It doesn't need to make sense. He can literally just do whatever he wants. So, if we're looking for him to only speak a certain way, we are limiting God's power with our expectations. Of course, not that we can stop God from doing anything, but if we're saying, all right, God, I'm only going to hear you if you speak in this certain way, can you imagine how much we miss? God is so powerful. He can speak in any way and at any time that he wants to. And I know, especially in retrospect, looking back, that he has said a lot to me that I did not hear at all because I was looking in the wrong places. Or maybe I did hear it and I thought, well, Not Elijah. Elijah did not expect God to act the way that Elijah wanted him to act. Elijah just knew what God sounded like. After a long, long life and ministry of spending day after year with God, he just knew. I want God to reward my faithfulness on my terms. I want to have served God, listened to God, etc., and then I want God to give me something really cool in return. I'm like, you can, so why don't you just do it, And in the Bible story is so epic. I mean, starting at the beginning of time, stretching off into the future and the apocalypse. It's so awesome. And I want my life to be epic and awesome too. But here's the thing. God doesn't always make my life an epic adventure. He doesn't always speak to me in the way I want him to, but he always speaks in a way that I can understand. I think the true reward that Elijah received for his long and successful ministry was not some magical rescue. The reward I think he received was an utter certainty about when the voice he heard was God. And I know many of you in this room have also had a long life and ministry with the Lord. I mean, I've had I guess, sort of, depending on, everything's relative, right? It feels like it's been a long time. And I take for granted sometimes that maybe God has already given me that great reward, the thing that is the gift that comes from years of faithful obedience in ministry, which is being able, without any interruption, any uncertainty, to know when the small, still, silent voice in my heart is God. The chapter finishes with the calling of Elisha, Elijah's disciple. And I think it's super dumb that their names sound so close. Like, why couldn't you have made it something different and made it a lot less confusing? But whatever, it wasn't my call. So, what's really cool about this story being attached to the story about the moment on the mountain, even though it seems like it's like why did you include that in the reading? Okay, so think back to a time when there weren't even any photographs. There wasn't anything that anyone could do to have some kind of assurance that their legacy would live on after their death. You couldn't record anything, really. Most people couldn't read or write. And for many people in that context, it was their children or the people who they mentored and taught and raised up that were their assurance that life does go on after death, because they knew they would die, and this person, whether it was their child or someone they had taken under their wing like this, that person would continue to live. So God gave Elijah this moment of silence, speaking to him so clearly. And then God showed Elijah, you were ready to die. You were ready to give up. You were ready to say, all right, God, it's been a good run. I think we're done. Elijah, you were ready for that. But I'm showing you that in that quiet core of your heart, there is a promise of life. I'm not done with you. You might be ready to be done with me. You might think I am done with you. You might be like, this is it. The church isn't growing. The ministry is not successful. Everything I've built, I'm not sure if it's going to last. But maybe we're looking for God to speak in a way that he's chosen not to. He gave Elisha to show him that this story was far from over. I wonder if maybe God has been trying to tell some of y'all, including me, some of us. I wonder if God has been trying to tell some of us something. But he's been saying it very quietly. He hasn't been fixing the problem magically. He hasn't been lifting you out of the situation. But there's something he's been trying over and over again to say, and maybe you're too tired to hear it. That is completely possible. But maybe you're not, and you just haven't been listening for the right thing. And so here, as I conclude in just a moment, I have my little timer. I'm going to let us sit in silence for 2 minutes, which is longer than it sounds if you haven't tried this kind of thing before. And I don't know, you might not get anything. You might not hear anything. That is completely fine. Because as I just said, God speaks in whatever way God wants. And if he's decided that this is not the moment, then he's not going to say anything to you. If you don't get some word during this moment of silence, that doesn't mean you're not good enough. It just means that God has something else in mind that he wants to say to you at a different time. So don't get all stressed about it. But I think it's worth a shot. See, God whispers the promise of new life if we can just listen. And all God's people said,